Hello and welcome to another insightful episode of Bona e Kiniso, where we help you realize the truth about and with software testing. I'm your host, Stefan Luckermans, and today we're diving into a crucial topic, the difference between risk-based approach and risk-based testing approach in software development. We will introduce a robust framework known as PROAC, which helps guide your risk management strategies. We will also explore a pragmatic approach to risk-based testing that helps teams determine the appropriate testing actions for features or user stories based on risk profiles. In today's fast-paced, agile-driven world, software teams must be agile and prioritize effectively. This episode will help you understand how risk-based approaches and PROAC fit into agile software development, empowering you to make more intelligent testing and project management decisions. Whether you're a Scrum Master, product owner, agile coach, or a tester in an agile team, this discussion is essential for delivering high-quality software and managing risks effectively. But before diving deeper, let's first clarify why managing risks is critical in software projects. Risk management is the process that continuously identifies, mitigates, or accepts risks throughout the project lifecycle. This allows adaptive planning and iterative progress in the spirit of the agile principle to embrace change. The risk-based approach begins during the epic definition phase, where high-level features or goals are defined. During this phase, risks are initially identified at a macro level. These risks might relate to the project, finances, resources, assets, dependencies, technical complexities, or used processes. By assessing risks early at the epic level, agile teams can align the epics with risk mitigation strategies from the start. A risk-based approach is about any risk, and mitigations can be financial, involve people, change-followed processes, etc. Teams often operate with limited time and resources as the project moves into sprints. Each sprint delivers incremental value, and teams must decide where to focus their efforts. On one hand, a risk-based approach allows teams to assess and prioritize mitigation actions continuously. On the other hand, a risk-based testing approach helps to continuously assess, prioritize, and decide on how thoroughly features, user stories, or technical components need to be tested. As the epic is broken down into features and features into user stories, risk assessments are updated, ensuring that potential issues are addressed early and comprehensively throughout the development lifecycle. One powerful guide is the PROAC framework, which provides a structured way to assess risks. Let's break down what PROAC stands for. P stands for prevention. This is about being proactive in preventing risks. By anticipating potential issues before they occur, teams can mitigate risks early and reduce the chance of adverse outcomes. R stands for reduction. Here, the focus is on reducing the likelihood or probability of the risk happening. This involves taking steps to minimize potential triggers or vulnerabilities. O stands for ownership. Risk ownership is essential in Agile. It means reassigning the risk to the correct owner and ensuring that someone is responsible for monitoring and mitigating it. Depending on the nature of the risk, this could be the product owner, Scrum Master, or a team member. A stands for accept. In some cases, accepting the risk may be easier and more efficient than acting on it. This might occur when the cost or effort to mitigate the risk outweighs the potential impact. C stands for containment. Lastly, containment refers to reducing the impact if the risk materializes. This involves creating contingency plans to contain the damage if the worst should happen. The PROAC framework encourages teams to be proactive in their risk management efforts, ensuring that they aren't simply reacting to issues but actively working to prevent them. Now, let's narrow our focus to risk-based testing within an Agile framework. This is a risk-based approach focused on product risks. It begins by evaluating your epics, features, or user stories to determine the likelihood that these entities may fail and the impact that such a failure would have on your business. Based on this evaluation, each entity is classified in a risk class, and the primary mitigation strategy becomes the level and scope of testing required for that entity. The goal is to ensure that higher risk areas are tested more rigorously to reduce the chances of critical issues. In this approach, testing efforts are aligned with the risk levels of different system parts, allowing the team to focus their resources where they are needed most. By adopting this risk-focused mindset, agile teams can make more informed decisions about how much testing is necessary, what testing techniques should be applied, how many test data sets to use, and whether tests should be automated or manual. Agile practices such as test-driven development, TDD, behavior-driven development, BDD, and exploratory testing complement this approach, as they encourage continuous feedback, iterative testing, and a strong emphasis on preventing defects early in the development process. In a pragmatic approach to risk-based testing, we assess the likelihood and impact of a failure for each feature or user story. By categorizing these factors into levels such as low, medium, and high, or a more detailed granularity in more mature organizations, we can create a 9-cell risk matrix that combines the likelihood of a defect occurring with its potential impact. Occasionally, we might encounter an unknown category for likelihood, where the probability of a defect cannot be reasonably predicted. This, anyhow, is classified as higher than a high likelihood. You could say unknown is the same as critical. The risk remains uncertain until further information or data becomes available, and uncertainty is deemed riskier. Once you have your risk matrix, you can identify areas where the risk is similar. Each of these areas becomes a risk profile or risk class. Depending on the organization's maturity, you will have 3, 4, 5, or more risk categories. Tip: don't go overboard with the number of risk classes because 1, you will have to describe for each class what risk-based testing means. 2, implement this in the field. 3, follow this up, etc. I tend to define 3 risk classes for reduced, regular, and tightened testing. Isn't that enough? The risk matrix allows us to classify features or stories into risk profiles or risk classes. Based on this classification, teams can determine the most appropriate actions. Here's how these risk profiles can guide decision-making. 1. Mandatory actions. For high-risk features and stories, mandatory actions might include executing tests several times across one or more different environments, prioritizing manual above-test automation, implementing robust testing techniques such as decision table testing, and increasing the number of test data sets to cover edge cases and variations. 2. Recommended actions. For medium-risk features and stories, recommended actions might include running a balanced number of tests, manually and automatically, using moderate-level testing techniques such as state transition testing, and focusing more on exploratory testing with enough test data. 3. Optional actions. For low-risk features and stories, optional actions might include lower test frequency, potentially skipping certain test types unless issues arise, maximal automation with no manual checks, fewer test data sets, and only covering the essential test cases. A small explanation of why high-risk features and stories should have a minimal number of automated tests. Test automation is most of the time fixed tests with fixed data sets, and this is 1, contradictory to multiple test data sets. 2, has the risk of testing pesticide, which means that executing the test again and again with the same data will not yield any defects after time, whereas it is the intention to find as many defects as possible in high-risk features and stories. And 3, humans can detect changed circumstances better than an automated test. That's why the rule is to automate all tests for low-risk features and stories, but limit automation for higher-risk profiles. But that is why you do risk-based testing, so you can assess this case by case. Anyhow, this approach ensures that testing resources are efficiently allocated based on the risk class of each feature or story. Testing efforts are intensified where they are most needed. It helps teams avoid over-testing the low-risk areas and under-testing the high-risk areas. By now we know why we need risk management. We know the difference between risk-based approach and risk-based testing approach. We know how to handle risks, and we know how to classify the risk for features and stories. We now recognize the high-level risk management process. The overall process can be broken down into 2 main parts: risk analysis and risk management, which work together in a continuous cycle throughout the project's life. These are the related activities. Part 1. Risk analysis contains Step A. Identification of risks. The first step is identifying potential risks, which could be technical, operational, or related to business goals. It's important to brainstorm and list these risks early to prepare the team for any uncertainties that could impact project success. Step B: assessment and clustering of risks. After identifying risks, the next step is to assess their likelihood and impact. This process often involves clustering similar risks together so the team can address them in a streamlined way, prioritizing the most severe risks. Step C: identification of countermeasures. Once risks are assessed, the team identifies countermeasures, actions designed to prevent the risk from happening or to mitigate its impact. This step is crucial for planning how to respond to risks proactively. Step D: selection of countermeasures. After identifying possible countermeasures, the team selects the most effective ones. This involves analyzing the cost and feasibility of different options and choosing the strategies that best suit the project's goals and resources. Part 2. Risk management contains Step E: planning and allocation. Once countermeasures are selected, the next step is planning and allocating resources to implement them. This could involve assigning team members to monitor specific risks, setting aside a budget for mitigation actions, or incorporating additional testing for high-risk areas. Step F: follow-up and reporting. Risk management is an ongoing process. Teams must continuously monitor risks and track the effectiveness of their countermeasures. Regular follow-ups ensure that risks are appropriately managed and adjustments can be made to address new or evolving risks. These 6 steps form a continuous cycle, meaning that the team regularly revisits risk analysis and management throughout the project to ensure that risks are under control and that the project remains on track. In conclusion, using a risk-based approach, risk-based testing, the PROAC framework, and a pragmatic testing approach offers an agile team powerful tools to manage uncertainty and deliver high-quality software. By classifying features and stories into risk profiles, an agile team can efficiently allocate their testing resources, ensuring that high-risk areas are tested rigorously while avoiding unnecessary testing in low-risk areas. Whether you're a Scrum Master, product owner, developer, or tester, adopting these strategies will help your team prioritize effectively and ensure better outcomes in every sprint. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Bona Ikiniso. I hope this podcast has provided valuable insights into risk-based approaches, the PROAC framework, and pragmatic testing strategies. If you still have questions or want to comment, please send a mail to podcast@thace.org.